Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And this is a special episode on my 2020 Ford marathon week to week. I actually had two human beings wanting to talk about one John Ford movie. So I have Jake and Foster joining me, both collaborators. Foster, very frequent collaborator, and Jake's been on. I think this is at least second or third John Ford movie.
Second Ford.
Yep. Second forward. But Jake, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
And thank you, Foster.
Thanks again.
And we're here to talk about My Darling Clementine. But before we get to that, for those who do not know and haven't tuned in before, we have three segments where we'll be starting off with our coming attractions for June 7th. It's June already, and I don't like that. But I don't know how much we're all going to like the big movie coming out for this weekend, but we have other options for you. But then we'll jump into My Darling Clementine, and then we'll have some recommendations for you. So, the big film that's going to save the summer box office is Bad Boys 4, Ride or Die. And I'm joking because I don't have a whole lot of faith that this weekend is going to do much in terms of turning things around for the box office, which makes me very sad. We'll just have to wait until Inside Out 2 comes out next weekend. But there are a few other films coming out this weekend. And Foster, which one did you want to spotlight?
Yeah, you two are going to take the real one I'm most excited about,
Yep.
but I am really looking forward to The Watchers, which is directed by M. Night's daughter, Ashana Night Shyamalan. Um, so she actually directed some of the TV show Servant, and her
Mhm.
episodes are really solid. Like you would never know that. I mean, she's very young, like you never would suspect anything different about the way those episodes were filmed. They were great. I really like the trailer for this too. I think it's got really good editing. It's just like makes you creeped and weirded out, in all the right ways. I don't know. I don't know much about it, which I think is the right way to enter a movie like this. So I am definitely gonna check it out.
Jake, did you have any thoughts? Are you excited for this one?
Yeah, I'll see it. I have to for a review show, but I think I was gonna see it anyway. Because I'm intrigued. Dakota Fanning's having a bit of a resurgence in the last year or so, reteaming with Denzel for Equalizer 3. Um, I really liked her in that Ripley miniseries for Netflix. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. But
Just a quick side note, they really missed out on calling that the Equalizer. But we're gonna just leave it at that. You're all welcome. But ever since that Watchers trailer dropped, I'm like, this looks really interesting. It's very mysterious, and then you see the name Shyamalan, and like, they have to be related, right? And then you realize, which I did watch all of Servant. I was a pretty huge fan of probably the first and last season of that show. Um, I feel like it kind of was dragging its feet for a lot of it towards the middle seasons there. But definitely in terms of like, I recognized her name multiple times from when it's like directed by him. Like, they have to be related. Um, can't be that much of a coincidence. So, and yeah, we don't want to know a whole lot going into this, and we'll have to see if she has a similar sensibility to her father and see if this one has some crazy twists waiting for us. But the one that realistically all three of us are most excited about coming out on Netflix, so it'll be nice and easy for people to check it out, is Richard Linklater's latest film, Hitman, starring Glenn Powell. So, Jake, what do you gets you excited about this film?
yeah, Linklater, I do like. I don't see everything that he puts out, but I'm always interested in anything he does. And then I just think, like, Glenn Powell's obviously blown up the last couple of years,
Mhm.
ever since Top Gun Maverick. I'm a huge fan of Set It Up as well. I've seen that movie like 5 times for no reason. And it's his first writing credit. So he co-wrote it. So there's a lot of things I think it's interesting. And, the premise, I think, is just intriguing as well. So it's got a little bit of everything going for
Absolutely. I certainly have been a fan of Glenn Powell since the Spy Kids 3D days
it.
when he randomly appeared as a little kid. That's a joke. I had no idea that was Glenn Powell. And to be fair, I had no idea remembering that he was in The Dark Knight Rises either. But he was. Uh he got pushed by Bane. But Foster, what gets you excited about Hitman?
I mean, Richard Linklater, of course, he directed my favorite movie of all time, School of Rock. And I think I'm also just all aboard the Glenn Powell hype train right now. I think he's really cool, and I love that he is basically the next Tom Cruise, I feel like is where he's headed. And I think that's really cool, just to sort of see someone like organically turn into a movie star before our eyes. I mean, I feel like it's been a big talking point in a lot of movie circles, the like death of the movie star, and uh I'm just so excited that there are people like him or people like Timothy Chalamet, where like if he's headlining a movie, it's like that's enough to sell tickets to it, which hasn't really been the case in the past 10 years or so. So it's kind of cool to see it make a comeback. Like him in the Twisters trailer. If you feel it, I just like I
Yeah.
get hyped up just seeing him. I don't know. I'm so excited.
Yeah, Glenn Powell, so hot right now. Glenn Powell. Um, Realistically, it was Everybody Won Some that got me super excited because I remember seeing him in Expendables 3 and none of the younger cast were done justice in that movie. They all were boring as shit. And I was glad when Mel Gibson captured all of them and imprisoned them. Because I'm like, please get them off screen. But then seeing him and Everybody Wants Him, he's so charismatic.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wow, how is this the same human being? And it got me excited seeing him pop up in things. When he got cast in Top Gun Maverick, I'm like, of course he did. And
Hmm.
he definitely has a lot of charisma, and I can't wait to see him play around with this particular film. Richard Linklater is one of the best contemporary filmmakers out there. What the hell was the name of it? That animated film that he did for Netflix, his last film with Jack Black doing the narration and everything about
Hmm.
Apollo
space.
10 and a half.
Apollo 10 and a half. Really enjoyed that a lot. And I want to keep seeing him do work with Jack Black. Can you imagine Hitman with Jack Black instead? I pay for it. But this has a lot of exciting things to go along with it. I wish I was seeing it in the theater, but I'll take it on Netflix. It is what it is. I'm assuming this played at the Angelica in New York probably this past week because Netflix owns their own theater in New York City where we released our movies in theaters so we can
Hmm.
count towards awards consideration and stuff like that. It's always cool seeing new actors collaborating with Richard Linklater and getting that involved because them writing this film together. But obviously, Glenn Powell really stood out as a star in a Richard Linklater movie with Everybody Won Some. So yeah, Hitman seems exciting. That'll probably be, Netflix will be like, this is the biggest movie out there in the world right now. It's like, sure. Because, apples to oranges. Did either of you hear them make that comment that like Barbie would have been just as big if it was a Netflix movie? And I'm like, no,
No.
have.
But
You're full of shit.
with the way the summer box office is going, they might actually be right in this case.
It makes me sad.
Yeah.
We're gonna see Garfield and Furiosa claw out for like scraps. As we're
Just
recording this episode is during this last weekend of May into June, which seems like dead water for movies, which is sad.
just while we're on the Glenn Powell train, slight sidetrack. Did either of you see the Blue Angels movie that he produced?
Yep.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean you know, it's sort of like a last dance sort of situation where people are like, it's propaganda. Yes, technically that's true, but you don't get the access without the Blue Angels agreeing to it. So it's very stock documentary type thing, but it's really good stock documentary.
I wish I actually saw it in IMAX because that probably
Yeah.
would have been really cool. But no, I watch it at home on my TV. So,
I watched it
but
in a theater Memorial Day weekend, and I'm really glad I did. So,
well, that's exactly how it was meant to be seen
yeah.
on one of the most America weekends, watching a documentary about Blue Angels. But we are here to talk about America's most famous director, John Ford, who was synonymous with Americana for a very long time. And what did he do best that people loved? He made westerns. And we're going to be talking about the 1946 western, My Darling Clementine, which you would think, based off of this title, seems like, oh, it's probably just a love story. No, this is about the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday. And it's just like, that's exactly what this is about. And I have some background. So this is indeed the idea of the story leading up to the gunfight at the OK Corral, which we'll get into, but definitely seems like Wyatt Earp was himself a tall talesman and was a liar and embellished a lot of things. But this is indeed starring Henry Fonda, who was in a lot of big John Ford films, and at that point, one of the biggest actors in the world. He even got him to narrate some of his propaganda films during World War II. So, like, people loved Henry Fonda, and he was playing one of the biggest legends in the American West, Wyatt Earp. So, obviously, that was a big selling point. And there's a Ward Bond sighting, which I will continue to check off every time I see him in a John Ford movie. Um, this does indeed use the song My Darling Clementine during the title sequences and indeed the end. This is based off of a biography from Stuart Lake, who wrote this based off of Wyatt Earp, who did show up in Hollywood yapping his gums about all the cool things that he did. This was adapted twice before into two films separately, both called Frontier Marshal. Yes, Earp did lie a lot. It definitely seems like he embellished a lot of his legacy. This actually was put into the National Film Registry in 1991. Ford recalls actually meeting Wyatt Earp while he was working during the silent film era earlier in his career. And oddly enough, Ford did not want to direct this film, but was contractually obligated by Fox. They're just like, you're going to do this. And he's like, I don't want to. And they're going to be like, you're going to do this. So he did. And this was shot in Monument Valley. Josephine Earp did not want anything to do with this film. She did not want to be portrayed in this film, but the character of Clementine is believed to be some kind of amalgamation of her and some other women. And Zanuck actually chopped up Ford's film because this was actually well over 2 hours, and Zanuck actually cut out 30 minutes of John Ford's film. So the theatrical cut of this movie is certainly not what John Ford shot and intended to be the film. Went in and cut over 30 minutes of footage to create this final film. So definitely seemed like John Ford and Zanuck from Fox did not have a great relationship with each other as they worked with each other. A lot of background on a lot of these films. It's like this was tumultuous. So, and we love to see studios going in and literally chopping up like a fourth of the film from directors and stuff like that. But getting into the actual film, let's start with you first, Foster. What were your general thoughts on the film?
Yeah, so this is the first time I've come on to talk about a John Ford movie that I've already seen before. I remember when you were first putting out the list of the John Ford movies, this was the one I requested because I think it's my favorite that I've seen so far. I think it's first and foremost, it is just one of the most beautifully shot black and white movies ever. It is like jaw dropping. I can't even believe it when I watch it. It's to me, it's the best looking John Ford movie that I have seen, and one of the best looking movies, period, that I've ever seen. I think it's also like moving at parts too. There's just like a lot of great, memorable images and moments of emotion that stand out to me. Um, the gunfight at the end, I feel like lives up to what you hope it would be. And even if it is chopped down a little bit, I appreciate the short run time. I'll just say that.
Like, not every studio intervention is bad.
Mhm.
Sometimes a director does need some help leading things out a little bit. I know a lot of people would probably argue we always want to see the director's vision, but like this final product turned out pretty great. Jake, what are your general thoughts?
Uh, yeah, I like this movie, and it's mainly because of what Foster said. Like the cinematography is ridiculous. It looks gorgeous. It's sort of I've seen I think six Ford movies. Um, I do like it better than the one we talked about last time. The I was on the Young Mr. Lincoln,
Hmm.
uh, but it's sort of in that middle class with Stagecoach and one other that escapes me right now. Um, I like it. It's got a it's held back by something that's not its fault, which we'll get to later. But yeah, it's good. I liked it. I This is also my second time because I watched it a few months ago. Because I didn't think I was going to be on this episode, so then I rewatched it the other night.
I'm like,
And
hey Jake, you want to listen to? Because I know you
yeah,
had mentioned like you'd interested in
yeah.
talking about it. I'm like, hey, let's make this a party. Um,
Um, so yeah, but my watching it last night or 2 nights ago, um, my thoughts really haven't changed from the first time I watched it. It looks gorgeous. I liked it. I have some issues with it. So
Now, quick side note about the show in general. Once we get to Wes Anderson, there'll definitely be a lot more episodes with multiple people on it because there's certainly not as many movies to choose from. Um, I had to incorporate a crew of friends who've been cycling through movies to make sure I had guests for all of these. Thank you, Foster, for being one of them. But I'm intrigued, Jake. Let's start there. What
yes.
what outside the control of this movie had you holding back from loving this movie?
So here's the thing. One of the movies I've probably watched the most in my life is Tombstone.
There you go.
It's I get that it's flawed, like the love story doesn't work in Tombstone whatsoever, but everything else is 10 out of 10 for me. And I'm just so connected and so invested in those versions of the characters that this one didn't really hit quite as well for me. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
It's interesting. Foster, have you seen Tombstone?
No, I wanted
Okay,
to watch it yesterday, but I didn't have the time. This
there
is
you
actually
go.
this is the first and only version of the whole OK Corral thing that I've ever seen, actually. So I'd actually be
Jake,
curious for you two to say how it differs.
Jake, have you seen Wyatt Earp, the other
No,
movie that came out around the same
and
exact time as Tombstone?
for the same reason this one has issues. I'm like they came out around the same time. This is my version. I
Hmm.
it sort of like I'm gonna use a so I've watched a lot of Sherlock Holmes adaptations, but one of the ones I will not watch for ridiculous reasons is Elementary because Sherlock exists. So it's just that, yeah, I don't want to do that because that other movie exists, you know.
It's an interesting comparison because the characters feel very different.
Correct.
Because
There's no mustache.
here's the thing: if you were to compare Henry Fonda and Kurt Russell as actors, there's very few actors that you could get that are further apart than the two of them. And what's interesting is each of them bring to Wyatt Earp exactly what you expect out of them. So like Kurt Russell's Wyatt Earp, there's one moment where you can see the fire in his eyes, and also God, his mustache is so great. Um, Side note, what Henry Fonda brings to this is there's a gravitas to his performance based off of he has such a presence but it's not like a swaggering one. Like Kurt Russell has a swaggering presence to him. He's very much more of like a John Wayne kind of swaggering presence than like Henry Fonda. That one moment with him at that tombstone, um, in this film moved me a lot. And it's because Henry Fonda can do that. There's just something so genuine and moving about like the timbre of his voice, the patience that he brings into his performance. And like sure, like he has his moments like he steps up to the plate in that shootout, like he's Wyatt Earp. And Don Ford does a lot of great things to accentuate him. Like the first time you see Wyatt Earp, that camera's pointing up at him on that horse. There's a it helps that larger than life persona that especially people at the time this film came out, like he was a living legend. People back then didn't realize that he lied about a lot of this stuff. But like he was a larger than life character in American culture. And John Ford really knew how to shoot Henry Fonda in this. Now, like it's hard to compare because like his brothers in Tombstone, it's Bill Paxton and Sam Elliott. It's like that's pretty legit. And they're both really charismatic actors, and you can really
Yeah.
connect. Like Ward Bond in this as Virgil, he definitely has that like kind of feeling like an older brother kind of feel of a character to him. Um, I think what the biggest difference definitely is like Doc Holliday, because like what Val Kilmer does as Doc Holliday is something. There is a lot that goes into that. And Val Kilmer is such a dynamic actor in his prime. And nothing against the actor who plays him in this film, but like I still think like Doc Holliday was a very effective character in this. He's a lot more low key, I feel like, in this. He's also this movie has a lot less swaggering than Tombstone, but also Tombstone was a Western that came out like 1990 something, and at a time where Westerns weren't really popular anymore. So I feel like they added a little bit of 90s personality to it.
Yeah, if we had to boil it down, that's the big difference between these two films. They're both very much films of their era. This is My Darling Clementine is very much a 40s Western, and Tombstone is very much a 90s action movie. It's got a ton of memorable lines. It's got, the shootouts are big. The characters are big, which I think makes them a little more memorable. This one's much more like an understated sort of western, much more going for the drama. If we had to boil it down a little bit, and that's the thing. I guess I'm not gonna remember these characters. I know that because I didn't remember the characters much 3 months after watching it. Um, but yeah, so that would be the difference. There is just their age. Because, and not, that's not a bad thing. It's just personal preference, like what type of movies there would be a way to boil it down.
That's fair. And now that we talked about another movie, plenty,
Yeah.
Foster, I guess what are some of the things that really stood out to you about My Darling Clementine?
I think it's very interesting that you two brought up the Doc Holliday character. So I've heard how good Val Kilmer is supposed to be in Tombstone, but having no other context, Victor Mature, I assume that's how you would say his
Yeah.
last name. He was my favorite part of the movie. I thought he was actually really amazing. Again, I have no point of comparison though, so I don't really know what he's supposed to be like or anything. But he's kind of like on his way out, whereas Wyatt
Mm,
Earp's like on his way in. So there's an interesting contrast there. But my favorite scene of the movie, I think, is when they're in the bar and the well, there's actually a couple bar scenes that are really good. The one I'm thinking of is when the theater actor is doing the to be or not to be, and then that's of course like
yeah.
essentially a contemplating suicide type of monologue, and then Doc Holliday, like picks up where the actor leaves off, and then it just has this really incredible close up on his face as you just feel the like sort of world weariness on his face, and then of course he has his little coughing fit. He has to leave, but I don't know. He just really is one of the standouts of the movie to me. So yeah.
I think in general, Doc Holliday's a much more interesting character than any of the Earps. Just
Mhm.
in general, no matter which version of the this story is told. But no, he had some really great moments. I love the moment where which that scene, I was a little weary about like that whole offshoot with like them trying to track down the actor and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But when that scene happened, I'm like, this is some really great acting going on in this scene. And that really does flesh out a lot about Doc Holliday at this time. You can tell he's trying to push Clementine away. He doesn't want her to be caught up in like I'm pretty sure he realized like I'm gonna die. And this is not gonna be a good thing for you to be around this life. And it also makes me sad to think like the other woman in this scenario, he felt perfectly comfortable having her around, and which also I think says a lot about where society values where she's from. And that has a lot to say. And that's very interesting context to be contemplating in a 1946 Western from John Ford, which is kind of unexpected. And I think that's a thing that John Ford Westerns don't get enough credit because I think a lot of people describe them all like they were just like old school, clean kind of westerns like Stagecoach deals with those kinds of societal dynamics as well. But I think the scene that really stood out to me first was where they strip it all down and it's just Doc and Wyatt. And they're having that chat at the bar. And I think that says a lot about these two characters. And there's some great acting going on there. And like good for mature. I don't know how you spell his last I say his last name, but like he's acting against Henry Fonda, who was one of the biggest actors at the time, and he really leaned into his role as Doc Holliday and did a great job with that kind of dynamic in this film.
Yeah, that was going to be my scene as well. They're, you know, they're meeting and feeling each other out initially. I really liked that that sort of scene as well. And I do think Doc Holliday, like it's just that stoicism that you get with the herbs that can make Doc Holliday like seem like the more fun character just because he's got that little bit of swagger for um whatever swagger this 1940s film has. He's a little more colorful, and yeah, it's when he's allowed to shine. I think that, like you guys said, were my favorite parts. So, but like as far as the Oop stuff goes, we've talked about it a little bit in the intro, but you can really see like the sort of the myth making
Mhm.
inside the movie. Like you hear his name and people know who he is. They're like, oh no. So I think they did a really good job of just subtly showing he already has a reputation before he got here. Um, and yeah, that was just great for me.
I so like the opening sequence of the film, which first off the cinematography and just those shots of Monument Valley are just like chef's kiss, absolutely gorgeous. And you have all the cattle coming into the frame with the mountains in the background. It's just like it's like how do you know you're watching a John Ford Western without me telling you? Boom, there it is. That opening sequence between Wyatt Earp and the Clantons was such an interesting interaction
Mhm.
because it says so much about both of them. You can tell the Clantons are like, this is our place. This is what we do. We don't want you coming in here and trying to do what we do. And Wyatt Earp, I think there's a bit of pride and a little bit of too self-assuredness that like, hey, I could do whatever I want. I'm coming in here, I'm gonna do this, do that, and we're gonna move on. And there's and it doesn't come off in a negative way because I feel like Henry Fonda just imbues this character with so much sense of honor that it's interesting that like he could get away with saying certain things like that because he was being a little cocky. And but he was also being strong. He wasn't going to be pushed around. And obviously stuff happens and they do stuff in the dark of night. They do things like that one moment where it's like they come back to find I forget what the character's name, but him dead, all the cattle gone. Like that was a heavy moment. I think I one of my favorite scenes in this whole film is and taking out the fact that like it was a very obnoxious representation of like the one Native American character in the movie, but like that guy shooting up that bar and how perfectly lit that shot was of like all darkness except the light coming out from the front door and Wyatt Earp just like dragging him out and it's like that whole sequence was shot so perfectly, but it also shows that Wyatt Earp's not going to put up with any crap. And he's going to be the one to step up and do something. And then I think, Jake, to your point, it's like, oh, the marshal from down yeah, where he was from. And they're like, not anymore. And he's just like, I don't want any parts of this. And there's so many Westerns that deal with lawmen wanting to get past being a lawman and just living a life and getting pulled back in. You have it in High Noon, you have it in this, or even boiling it down to men trying to leave their past behind and being pulled right back into it, because you could include Shane, my namesake, in that conversation as well, in terms of that kind of it's such an interesting idea that's thrown around in a lot of westerns because it tests the quote unquote metal of a man to be like, this is what you were born to do. Can you just throw it all away? And of course, he winds up taking over when, somebody he cares about winds up dead and they steal all of his cattle. Is like, well, I'm going to use this badge now. And obviously, this all leads up to such a fantastic sequence at the end with that gunfight. Because, like, John Ford knows how to shoot action, John Ford knows how to shoot a film. And this is acted so well. It was so well staged. It was intense, great cinematography. That one shot of Wyatt Earp coming right up the center of that shot in the shootout. But I guess what are some of the other things I guess either of you wanted to add that really stood out to you about the film, or even specifically about the shootout at the end
Um,
of
I,
Foster?
yeah, the shootout I do think is really great, and I think it's like 90% just because of the build up, like you were talking about, like that. It feels like a minute or so of just walking up. It's a great like tension builder. Aside from the ending, I feel like I've mentioned this on every one of these episodes I've come on, but I'm just always surprised that John Ford has a sense of humor in his movies. And there's a couple moments that I just wanted to mention. My favorite one that made me laugh, I forgot about this, was when they're looking for the actor who's gone.
Mhm.
They're about to, they like the crowd just starts to like heckle and tries to grab hold of the guy to like put him on that plank and walk him around the city. And Henry Fonda's like, hey, 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 what's going on here? And they're like, well, the actor's not here. We are gonna take him, run him around the city a couple times. And he's like, all right, sounds fair to me. Like he was
Gonna
just
let
like
him
on
run
board
the
with.
rail.
Yeah, he was like, I'm on board. Um, and then another one was all the people who kept talking about, you can just smell the desert flowers. And he's like, no, 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 that's just me, barbershop. Like I don't know, a couple moments like that I think add a lot of levity here. So much of it is Henry Fonda too. He just has like a great smile that
Hmm.
because he's so stoic throughout the movie, but like in the moments where he like lets his personality shine through, I think he's just so good, I think.
He was having so much fun in that one scene with the rail because you can tell the moment where he starts having fun, he just has this giant grin on his face,
Hmm.
and it's just like, oh, he's playing along too. Yeah, there's definitely some moments of that sense of levity and humor, and you know there's some heavy stuff going on in this movie. And sometimes you just need a little reprieve from it. So, Jake, was there anything else you wanted to throw in there?
Not really, not that stood out. I would just say, a couple of the other things that, you know, pull me back a little bit is, you got some old Hollywood stuff. We touched a little bit on it with the one Native American character. Not great. Same with some of the women character. You have some of those old Hollywood things that that's gonna happen in some of those older movies. Uh, didn't totally take me out of it, but just like well, yeah, just something worth noting, I think.
Yeah, I think the character of Clementine is much more of a device really in
Mm,
this film in terms of how she fits into the world perspective of both Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp at their particular places in life.
mm,
Because in that moment, I don't think Doc Holliday's really good for anybody, and I think he realizes that because he's too much of a man to just be honest with the woman about his feelings. So he just keeps trying to run away from her, or push her away. And then you have those moments where it's Wyatt Earp and her at that gathering and are dancing together and stuff like that. And you're feeling that out, but is it Chihuahua is the name of the character?
Yeah.
Uh, I think I think she has some interesting layers to her. I don't know how much the film could have explored them a little bit more, but she kind of reminds me of a character in the film High Noon. I don't know if either of you have seen this character, but he she's the odd one out in the room because she's obviously not supposed to be white. Um, I'm pretty sure the actress was. But it's also the 1940s. But I think she kind of sticks out in certain ways, and she knows it, and she kind of owns it a little bit. And she's that kind of woman that's a little bit more rough around the edges. It is a very common trope, though, in a lot of westerns. And even leading up to shows uh why am I blanking? The HBO one, with Ian
Deadwood.
McShane, Deadwood. You even see that kind of idea of there's the her pretty perfect kind of woman who's oh, you're too good for being this rough and tumble kind of place. And then there's the rough around the edges woman that kind of represents the environment and how some of the men connect with that kind of environment. But here's the thing, the film's from 1946. So John Ford was the one really setting trends in terms of these kinds of tropes in westerns. So it's interesting seeing some of the early pieces of that being played out here. But my
Mhm.
last big thing is this is a gorgeously shot film. The music really works well. This feels like that old classic kind of Western. And in a lot of ways, this is regarded in the greatest Westerns of all time kind of conversation. I'll admit, I'm much more of a spaghetti Western and a Clint Eastwood Western kind of person than I am a John Ford kind of Western person. But it's hard to argue that some of these just really hit those beats so well, or not only hit those beats, but created them. And I think that's the interesting context to be looking at that. John Ford was the one who was laying down a lot of these trends in terms of westerns. So I guess do either of you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to throw out before we move on to recommendations?
Good.
nope.
Co-sign. Beautiful looking movie.
Boom. Well, just to keep my listeners here updated, this is very interesting because Foster and I just did They Were Expendable last week, which I had just put as my number three. And then I just replaced my Darling Clementine as my number three. Still have Stagecoach and The Grapes of Wrath as my two and one. Grapes of Wrath really hit me when I watched that again for this. Um, It'll be very interesting as I go through these films to see if anything will unseat The Searchers. Because, like, The Searchers is one of my favorite films of all time. Really looking forward to getting up to that. I think in September. That's how far
Yeah,
out I am from
yeah,
this.
yeah. Searchers is one of those that was the other one that's right here with Stagecoach and My Darling Clementine. And then Mr. Lincoln, one you'll get to later, sort of a little lower. And then another one you'll get to later is sort of my favorite. Um, I think I have uh, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I think is my favorite.
Is one that I'm very much looking forward to checking out because I actually haven't seen that one yet. So I'm excited to see that. But we're here now in our final segment of the show for this week to give you some recommendations. And Foster, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
I'm doing it. I'm recommending Daredevil 2003 with Ben Affleck. Um, I am specifically recommending the director's cut, which is genuinely, like unironically, a better movie. It
Mhm.
adds more scenes to flesh out the story. It flows a little bit better. It feels less handcuffed than the original. It's not like an incredible movie, so don't get me wrong. It's just one that I rewatched the other day and had so much stupid fun with it. It's a dumb movie. So like I know this. But it's just like so early 2000s in the best way. The soundtrack is just it's got like we were talking about before, Evanescence, but it's got like
Yep.
Seether, you know, like it's just
Yeah.
like it's ridiculous. I love it so much. And then even just the cast, like Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner, and their incredible sequence at a playground, which is one of the great movie scenes of all time, I think.
It's
Um,
so silly. It's so
uh,
silly.
Colin
Uh,
Farrell is just on how many drugs in the filming of this movie? I don't know,
unhinged.
but he is like, yeah. Death by Peanut is not something I ever thought I would see in a movie. But hey, it works.
I really believe that it's because this movie, in its theatrical version especially, is not a good movie. Is that Michael Clark Duncan does not get enough credit for his portrayal as Wilson Fisk. Like they
Yeah.
don't give him a lot of scenes, but just the pure presence of him. And here's the thing, because it's such a big part of discourse today to get so freaking out about changing races of characters. I was well when the Daredevil movie came out. I don't remember if there was a big, oh my God, the Kingpin's black or not, but like Michael Clark Duncan's so good. And I wish that the only reason I would have liked to see him pop up in more things after that in Lies Wilson Fisk. But he just had some great presence. The director's cut really does help with logic because there is no reason why the police would show up at the Kingpin's tower at the end of the theatrical cut of the movie. It's just like, how did they know to go there? It makes absolutely no sense. But in the director's cut, there's actually a reason why the police show up at the end. And I rewatched that. I'm like, wait a minute. There is no conceivable reason why the police would come to arrest Wilson Fisk at this moment. Rewatching the theatrical cut and then remembering to the director's cut that, oh, there's that whole entire subplot with Wesley Owen Welch that leads up to that point. I'm like, oh, that's why the cops know to go there. So yeah, the director's cut actually helps narratively to make the film make more sense.
Mhm.
Besides, adding some interesting drama. Julio's in it, right?
Say that again.
Is Coolio, if I remember correctly, in the director's cut.
Oh,
He's the one that's like that whole subplot's him on trial,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is him. Yep.
So 2003. So
Hmm.
2003.
Yeah, the
But
hair.
the hair. That movie was also that was the era where I really hated Colin Farrell. And Bullseye was one of the reasons why I hated Colin Farrell. In Bruges, saved Colin Farrell for me. And I think for a lot of people. And now we can love Colin Farrell because he's amazing. But yeah, Daredevil director's cut. That and the Punisher director's cut were both movies I had on DVD when I was younger that I'm just like, these get a bad rap. And I think it's because I didn't realize I had directors of the movies. It's just like, oh. And then you watch the theatrical, I'm like, that's probably why.
Mhm.
But that's a fun one. And not so fun recommendations that what Jake has in store for us.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because I never saw the either version of Daredevil. But people
Don't
have
watch
talked.
the original version then.
I know, but people have talked. Probably that's why I didn't watch the original. But people have talked up the director's cut enough. It might be worth. I've got to give it a shot eventually. But yeah, so I've been going through a little bit of a Lucas Hedges phase because there were a couple movies of his that I hadn't seen before. Um, so I was watching those, going through Letterboxd, and like, I don't give 5-star reviews. Really, I don't know why. I just don't. I just became that person. But one of them that I had at 5 stars was Manchester by the Sea. So me, in all my wisdom, I'm like, oh, let's rewatch that one again. Oh God. First of all, it is funnier than people remember. There's a lot of jokes in that movie, but nobody remembers that because it's also just really depressing. Um, I am still angry that they pushed Viola. Excuse me. They pushed. Oh shoot, blanking.
Kyle Davis.
No, thank you. Into supporting actress category because they didn't think she'd um, get the nomination or the award ahead of um, Emma Stone because it meant Michelle Williams doesn't get an Oscar statue, and she should win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. That talk scene is one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever seen. It's just heartbreaking. And I watched it again, and it's still 5 stars. So,
There we go. I'm gonna say something.
and
Oh,
sorry, one more thing. Editing, immaculate. All right, now I'm done.
I'm gonna say something about people from Philly, New York, and Boston that they're probably not gonna appreciate being compared to each other. But I'm from one of the middle states, like Connecticut and New Jersey, that's just plopped in between them, so I don't care. Um, Philly people, New York people, and Boston people all have something very much in common. They're all funny people, and I think it's all coming from a place of like dealing with so much shit that you have to make jokes about things. And I think that's the thing, like you watch something that's very Boston, it's gonna be funny at times because it's like gotta make a joke to, fill in the void of sadness that's going on here. And you see it in New York people, and you definitely see it in Philly people. I can attest to that. But no, Manchester by the
I,
Sea was a very impactful film. 2016 was an interesting year for film, wasn't it? It's like there are some big time performances here, and that is certainly a class A example of category fraud. In terms of Viola Davis getting pushed to supporting for Fences when her and Denzel were both the leads of Fences. And boy, did she win that Oscar. That was an ugly cry. It was a snotty, ugly cry. And she got
Uh,
her Oscar.
that was one where, like, from the trailer, you're like, she's like, and I was standing with you, and you're like, okay, she's winning it. It takes you like 5 seconds. She's incredible.
and
She's like, bam.
I think that performance is, I mean, it wouldn't have won. That might be a better performance. As much as I love La La Land, that performance may have been better than Emma Stone. But like, it's half politics, who actually wins. So you weren't stopping that train. But also,
Well, except for Best Picture.
Uh, yeah, did you just say New Jersey was in the Midwest? Is that is
I
that
said
what I
mid.
is that what
What
I
I
said?
said was one of the middle states in between.
No,
So, like, you don't get what I mean. You have Philly, New
I'm here.
York,
You
and
derailed me.
Boston. New Jersey's in between Philadelphia and New York, and Connecticut's between New York and Boston, where people stuck in the middle that are told, like, you're just part of Philly, you're just part of New York, you're just
I
part of
get it.
Boston all the
I
time.
get
That's
it.
what I meant.
All you East Coast people are just here trying to say, look, we're normal. We're not with them. Look at us. I see how it is. I, yeah, whatever. Us
All I'm
actual
saying is, as
Midwesterners.
somebody from New Jersey, I would like to have my own identity as people from New Jersey. I didn't say we were normal. I can guarantee you, I've been lived, born, raised, and lived in New Jersey my whole life. Normal is not what I would consider people from New Jersey. I'm just saying, for once, I would like to have New Jersey have its own identity. I'm not from Philly. I'm not from a suburb of Philadelphia. I'm from a different state, but I'm
You
still
got the
branded that
Sopranos.
way.
I thought your identity was what the Sopranos were for.
Well, to be as an Italian American from New Jersey, I would also like my identity to not just be boiled down to mobsters or Jersey Shore, but I can't control pop culture.
I'm
So
so happy I've done this. I apologize at the same time as well.
Foster's just sitting there from New York and just being like, look at this Jersey person being all insecure, saying a bunch of bullshit. Um, which also, to be fair, Sopranos was very much like North Jersey people. Because there's a big difference. But I'm not going to get into that anymore. This is not about that. So I have some recommendations for you too. So the one new film that I watched that finally got to watch was Robot Dreams, and this movie blew me away. I was shocked that in a year that we had The Boy and the Heron and Across the Spider Verse, I think Robot Dreams had a legitimate like legitimate argument why it should have won Best Animated Feature. I think the only thing going against it, it didn't come out in 2023. Getting released in theaters 5 months later. Robot Dreams is one of my top three films of 2024 so far. It blew me away. Just the magic of this film. Like, this film hits so hard. I watched the Breakfast All Day review with Christy Lemire and Alonzo Duralde, and they both gave it a 10 out of 10. I don't think that's ever happened. I've been listening to them review movies for years, and they both gave it a 10 out of 10. This movie blew me away. Um, I I don't know how it'll hit with people who haven't been through breakups and trying to redefine themselves afterwards. But this movie hits so hard in terms of that dynamic of when you're with somebody for a long period of time, certain things become part of your relationship and are defined by your relationship, and how this film navigates you trying to take ownership of those things again afterwards and redefining them in a new relationship. Just this movie was beautiful. The music choices, the animation, the incorporation of dreams. It was just every single aspect of this film blew me away. I loved it so much. Did either have either of you seen it already?
I haven't watched it yet, no.
No.
Well, now I'm just building up even more expectations for it. I legitimately I was all gung ho on the Boy and the Heron train and wanted that to win Best Animated Feature, which it did. Now I'm like questioning it honestly because this movie hit on such a deep emotional level. One film from my watch list that I wanted to recommend is the Phoenix City Story. I had no expectations going into this older film, it opens with like a 15-minute like mockumentary version of like this interviewer showing up in this small town interviewing the people of the town post what happens in the film. But this is a brutal thriller about a small town and the racism, the sexism, the hate that boils up underneath. And honestly, this films feel so uncomfortable today because I feel like it really captures a lot of what's still going on in our country today. And it is such a fascinating film from literal decades ago. And just it's beautifully shot black and white. It is brutal and bloody. It shocks you. The things that happen in this movie, you would not expect a movie to even dare to do today, which kind of surprised me. It was something else.
What's
So
this?
the Phoenix City Story, and Phenix is Phenix.
That's why I couldn't find it. Okay. I was typing
There
it
you go.
weirdly. All right.
Yes, it's not spelt like the bird with an O in it.
Yeah. What made you
And then
watch
my
this one again?
how did I watch it?
Or like what made you want to watch this one?
It's like a 5,800 movie watch list, and I'm trying to remember why this got on there. It's I A lot of the movies on my watch list have either been nominated for an Oscar or on some top lists of films of all time kind of thing. And I just, randomly do a random number generator and
Okay.
land on things and just watch them. This is from 1955. I'm trying to see if it got nominated for.
It did not.
It's nominated for a Saturn Award. That's interesting. It is in the National Film Registry, 2019. Interesting. How'd it wind up on here? I don't remember. To be frank, I don't remember how most of the movies that are on my watch list got there, but I watch them anyway. And then lastly, one film that I own that I rewatched recently was Dune, I guess part one. Um, it's like just especially after watching Dune Part Two this year, which is my number two film of the year so far. It's just so striking. I do miss some of the actors from the first film because, like Oscar Isaac, I really loved in this film. Obviously, Jason Momoa is so great, and also knowing some Dune lore. Will we be seeing Duncan, Idaho again? And it's one of those kinds of things where rewatching this, I was not as big on this because this really felt like a part one to me. And realistically, watching it again, it really does feel like a part one to me. I don't really feel like this movie had a really satisfying conclusion for me. But after seeing what Dune Part 2 did, it doesn't matter because Doom Part 2 absolutely blew me away. This is still a great film, and it does some incredible heavy lifting, building up this world and everything. So it's just a special kind of towering epic of science fiction that not many directors could pull this off, and Denis Villeneuve is incredible. And he can make whatever the hell, and I will be seeing it. So we'll be getting a third Dune and whatever other because he wants to do another sci-fi movie next. I forget what the name of it was, but interesting things on the horizon. But those are all of our recommendations. Plus, were you going to add something?
No, I was just gonna ask if you saw that the Sisterhood trailer for the HBO Max show. The
Oh, I didn't watch it yet, but I will be watching the show. So,
Yeah. No, I mean it looks very much in line with the whole universe and everything. Emily Watson seems to have like a pretty substantial role in it, which is a pretty cool casting choice. Yeah, I don't really know much about it other than I assume it's about the Bene Gesserit, but other than that,
Jesuit. It's so interesting watching Javier Bardem in part one again
mhm,
and him being so stoic, and then in part two being so damn funny.
mhm.
Which that it's very interesting, and also remembering how little Zendaya is actually in the first movie because she becomes
Mhm.
so important in the second one. But no, it's still a special film, even if I don't feel like, and I don't knock movies that much for it's like the ending's a part of the movie, and if it doesn't feel like a complete ending, doesn't stop the rest of the film from being great. Like I still really loved Across the Spider-Verse. I didn't love how it ended, specifically where it ended. But like Dune really feels like it's a lot of build up and you don't get any kind of big payoff for it in the first film, but God, it's some great world building and everything. So, but anyway, and that's another episode of Welcome to the Wasteland, John Ford edition. We only have like 7 more months of this. Um, we'll make it through. But Jake and Foster, thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Thanks
Thanks for
again.
having me.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.